is up, everybody? Matt Moda here to give you some WNBA bangers for tomorrow's WNBA betting slate. We're talking Wednesday, July 10th. We have a massive 5-game slate for the WNBA going on tomorrow. So it's only right. I'm going to give out 5 picks for that betting slate as well. I'm going to have 1 pick for each game tomorrow, 2 mainline plays, 3 player props for you guys to lock in, 1 play for each game. Now, I'm recording this earlier on Tuesday, so I do not have my Tuesday recap for you guys. I do have 1 pending play. It is the Lynx -7, so we'll have to see if that play cashes or not. So the total season results I'm about to give you do not include Tuesday, whether that play wins or whether that play loses. On the entire season, it's not been great. We are down 0.81 units on the year, and it's been a very, very hit or miss season. Whenever it feels like we are going on a run, the opposite happens. Whenever it feels like we have a horrible stretch of games, we start to go on a run. We have yet to been able to have any extended success, which hopefully we cash Tuesday's play, and hopefully we have a great day with these picks in this video, carrying ourselves, propelling ourselves towards a hot streak that we're about to go on. We'll see if that ends up happening. Fingers crossed there. I would appreciate it for those of you that are not already, if you could subscribe to my YouTube channel, and then for this specific video, if you could comment, I would appreciate that as well. And then I do have a Dub Club where I send all my plays out for only $5 a month. So if you have any interest in that, plays get sent directly to your phone. Check out the link in the description of the video. It's in the pinned comment as well. Enough of that. Let's get into these bangers. So I'm just going to go in order of when the games are being played. So there's 5 games. The earliest game is the Liberty versus the Sun, and I'm taking the Liberty -1.5. That is at -120 odds at Fanatics. I absolutely love this as a buy low spot for the Liberty. They're coming off of a super disappointing loss to the Fever. They only scored 16 points in the fourth quarter of that game. They were outscored by 12 points in the fourth quarter as well. And in general, it was just a very, very bad game offensively for the Liberty. I did not see that coming. I had the over in that game, so I definitely got burned. But they only scored 78 points total in that game, and they only once scored more than 20 points in any of the 4 quarters. Only in one of the 4 quarters did they score more than 20 points. The Liberty average 86.7 points per game on the season, so that 78 points is well below their average, which looks pretty rough when you consider the fact that the Fever have a very bad defense, and when you consider the fact that heading in to that game, those 2 teams had played 3 times. The Liberty had averaged 99 points per game in the first 3 games against the Fever. So maybe that was just a spot to back the Fever, that some regression was always going to come for the Liberty offense after how well they had played and how much they had smoked the Fever heading into that game. Regardless whether that's true or not, this now represents a great buy low opportunity for the Liberty coming off of that Fever loss. Now they're playing a much better team in the Connecticut Sun. I don't care. This is still a spot for the Liberty. Of course, if you look even a little bit further back and you look at the Liberty heading in to that game against the Fever, they were coming off of a pretty impressive win against the Lynx, a Lynx team that had smoked the Liberty in both of their games prior. So maybe it was a letdown spot heading into the Fever game. Now that makes it a buy low spot heading into this game for the Liberty after that loss. And even with that loss considered, the Liberty are still an incredible team. Obviously, a ton of talent up and down the roster. Over their last 7 games, 3rd best net rating in the WNBA. Again, even if you take into account that loss to the Fever. And the Sun, at the beginning of the year, they were one of the best teams in the WNBA. I'm pretty sure they were the last undefeated team. They just were smoking everybody. That really has come to an end. They've been crashed down pretty badly. Over the Suns' last 7 games, they're only 4-3, so they're barely over 500. But more importantly, their net rating is a slight positive 0.7 net rating. That basically means they've been slightly above average over their last 7 games. Their defense, that was the best in the WNBA by a wide margin. They've only been 4th best over the last 7 games, and their defensive net rating is 99.1. And to put that into context for you, that defensive rating of 99.1, that would be good for the 5th ranked defense in the WNBA if you just extrapolated that out to the entire season. Slightly above average. Sun have been disappointing for a while now, while the Liberty, it's a great bounce back spot for them, and they have been playing really well outside of that Fever game. So I absolutely love backing the Liberty in this game tomorrow. Hopefully they come through, cash that out for us. Next up, this is the Fever versus Mystics game, and I'm taking Aaliyah Boston under 15.5 points, -115 odds at Bet365. Now this one is definitely going to be a little bit scary, and that's kind of a theme with the plays that I'm going to have today. But this one by far is the scariest. We'll go ahead and label this our Pepto play of the day. Looking at Aaliyah Boston, she's been playing really, really well recently. I'm not going to take anything away from that. She's gone over this number in 3 straight games. She's gone over this number in 4 of 5, and she's gone over in 7 of 9 as well. So you look at all that and you're probably wondering, okay, why the heck are we fading her? Well, number one, those of you that followed along with my NBA season, which we were just incredible with our player props, what we love to do, we love to fade recent results, and we love the flip-flop method. So the fact that she has gone over 3 straight games in all those games, that actually makes me like this under even more, because the more likely scenario here is that she is unable to keep up that type of performance, that she comes back down to earth, and efficiency, everything kind of drops, making it so that she goes under. And if you look at the entire season, there's yet to be a point this season where she had gone over in 4 straight games. Right now, she's gone over in 3 straight. And that's not me saying like, oh, that 4th game, that's just when players are simply unable to play well 4 games in a row. Just what I'm saying is that that's not how the law of averages work. She's had a game where she scored 27 points. She's had another game where she's only scored 5. That's the law of averages in the NBA. Her averaging 15 points per game doesn't mean she scores 15 points per game every single game, right? Sometimes 20, sometimes 10, and everything above and in between. So, we get to flip-flop method, fade recent results, but the main reason why we're on this under is because it's a really, really tough matchup. Aaliyah Boston scores basically all of her points in the paint via post-up. The Mystics just do not allow any points in the paint in the restricted area, and they do not allow many points via post-ups as well. Boston, 64% of her points come in the restricted area. That's by far the area of the court in which she scores the most points. The Mystics literally have allowed the fewest points per game in the restricted area. Not a good matchup. Boston scores the majority of her points via post-ups. The Mystics allow the fewest points per game via post-ups in the WNBA. Now, those two stats are obviously correlated. Scoring in the restricted area, scoring in the post are correlated. Same thing with not allowing points in those areas as well. And this has held true over the past 7 games. The Mystics have allowed the fewest shots attempted in the restricted area. And if you look at Props Madness, which is a phenomenal website that I'm using for a lot of this player prop data, and WNBA players with a similar shot profile to Aaliyah Boston are only 2-7 to the over of their point total against the Mystics. So that's looking at the player, and it's looking at the player's point prop as well, what their point prop is priced at. That also includes Boston, who's 1-2 to the over against the Mystics this year. But looking at everything, the under is definitely the right play here when you consider the fade recent results method, the flip-flop method, and when you consider matchup hunting as well. Let's hope that comes to fruition and she goes under, cashing this out for us. That's our second play. Third up, we're heading to the Storm and the Aces game. And we're taking the Storm plus 5.5, -120 odds. This one is best offered at ESPN Bet. Now, this is another play that is going to feel a little bit scary because taking anything other than the Aces in a game they're playing is definitely scary because the Aces have been on fire recently. But the Storm have been not quite as, but close to as good as the Aces recently. And the Storm are playing at home where they are significantly better. So I absolutely love getting them to cover the 5.5 points here. Most books have this at 5 or 4.5, so we are getting some value. Let's hope the CLV ends up being in our favor, that we're getting a really good price here. But one thing I do want to be clear is that this is not a play because I want to fade the Aces. This is more so a play because I want to back the Storm. That is a key difference here. The Aces have been great. I'm not going to take anything away from them. Since Chelsea Gray has come back on June 19th, the Aces have been great. The best net rating in the WNBA in that span, best effective field goal percentage, best true shooting percentage, best offense. Really, really good. No doubt. But since in the last 7 games, the Storm have also been very good. In their last 7 games, they have the second best net rating in the WNBA, only behind the Aces. And they're really balanced, which is what I like. The third best offense with the second best defense. They've gone 6-2 over their last 8 games. And admittedly, one of those losses did come to the Aces, but that game was in Vegas while this game is in Seattle. And that is a very key point that I want to make here. The Storm have historically been a very, very good home team, a team that plays better at home. That's been the case this year as well. They're 9-2 on the year at home, and they literally have the best home net rating in the entire WNBA. So yeah, it's probably likely if you're just looking at the winner, that the Aces win straight up. But I think the more likely scenario is that the Storm are able to cover 6 points and at least keep this game close. And I do think that the Aces are being a little bit overvalued, while mostly the Storm are being a little bit undervalued. So I think this is a great opportunity to buy in on the Storm. Let's hope they come through by not losing by 6 or more. That's our third play. Next up, we only got 2 more. They're both going to be player props. Next up, Tina Charles over 14.5 points. This is offered at -115 odds at Bet365. So another player prop this time. This play and my next play, and that's also my last one, are both going to be player props. The Sky have been playing really, really well recently, so it does feel kind of weird taking a player over against them. Now, I'm not taking the Dream to cover any type of spread, but I do think that Charles is in line to have a good game. There are matchups, there are certain circumstances that Tina Charles should be able to exploit, and mostly it's down low in the restricted area, and it's in the mid-range as well. Now, you don't think of the Sky as this type of team because they have Angel Reese, they have Kennedy Carter, who are generally players that score a lot around the rim. You wouldn't view them as a team that struggles to guard the restricted area, but that's actually exactly the case. Not only do they struggle at guarding the restricted area, they have literally allowed the most points per game in the restricted area in the entire WNBA. Another area of the court in which they struggle is the mid-range. Those are 2 spots on the court that Tina Charles scores the most on the Dream, but a lot of points in general as well when you compare her to the rest of the WNBA. So I mentioned she scores the most points on the Dream in the restricted area, but if you look at the last 7 games, she actually has the 7th most attempts in the entire WNBA in the restricted area. So most on the Dream, 7th most if you just look at the wide span of the WNBA. And again, the Sky have literally allowed the most points per game in the WNBA in the restricted area. And then if you want to go a little bit farther back from the basket, the mid-range, Tina Charles is tied for making the 4th most mid-range shots in the WNBA over the last 7 games. In that same span, the same 7-game span, the Sky have allowed the 3rd most made mid-range shots in the WNBA. So it is a good matchup for Tina Charles. And this is also another situation where we get to fade recent results. Not quite as aggressively as the Boston one, but Charles has missed this in 2 straight games, has not shot well in 2 straight games. She scored 12 and 13 points in that stretch, shooting 5 of 11 and 5 of 14 in those 2 games as well. So it's kind of the inverse of why we faded Aaliyah Boston. The most likely scenario, in my opinion, is that her shooting splits go up a little bit after 2 rough performances, and she has a really good matchup to do so. So I love taking her over in this one. Let's hope that comes to fruition. And then lastly, our 5th and final pick of the video, Arike Ogunbowale over 2.5 made 3-pointers, -165 odds at Bet365. Now, to be clear, I do not love the -165 odds. That is probably the juiciest play in terms of how juiced those odds are that you've probably seen me play on this YouTube channel. I don't love the odds, but I think this is a phenomenal play. I love this play, and I do think that it's worth locking in even at those odds. This is like the perfect marriage of flip-flop method, fading recent results, along with matchup hunting, even more so than the other 2 player props that we talked about. In general, Ogunbowale has not been shy to hoist 3-pointers. Her, Caitlin Clark, Sabrina Ionescu shoot the most above the break 3-pointers in the WNBA. It's those 3, whatever time frame you want to look at, those are almost always going to be the top 3, with normally Ionescu at the top. But regardless, she's not been shy to shoot, but she has not shot well recently. She's only, in her last 2 games, she's gone under. In both games, 2 games ago, she was 1 of 7 from deep. Last game, she was 2 of 6 from deep. So again, that's under in 2 straight games with a combined 3 for 13 shooting in those 2 games as well. Of course, back that up a little bit. How did she do heading into these last 2 games? Well, she went over in 5 straight. Literally 5 straight games. She made 3 or more 3-pointers. So yeah, it was only natural that shooting was going to come down a little bit. Again, flip-flop method, fade recent results. It's what I preach all the time in my NBA videos. And it applies, honestly, across the board with sports. And that's just kind of, especially for 3-point shooting, that's just kind of how it works. A 40% 3-point shooter, they don't consistently go 2 of 5 or 4 of 10 from deep. Instead, they'll have games where they go 4 of 6, 4 of 7, 5 of 6, and then they'll have other games 2 of 8, 1 of 7, 1 of 6, all that stuff. That's just how shooting works with not just the NBA, not just WNBA, just in sports in general. That's how these averages work. So after 2 poor shooting games in a row, perfect time to buy back in. Expectation is and should be that she shoots better this game. And it's a phenomenal matchup for her to get out of this dry shooting spell as well. The Mercury have allowed the most points per game from above the break three-pointers in the entire WNBA. And that's where Ogunbowale loves to shoot them. If you look at her last 7 games, she's attempted the second most above the break three-pointers, only behind Sabrina Ionescu. And if you look at that same stretch, the last 7 games, the Mercury have allowed the most attempted above the break three-pointers as well. A match made in heaven when you consider flip-flop method and when you consider matchup hunting. Literally as flippy-floppy as it gets, along with literally the best matchup that it gets as well. Hopefully that marriage works for us. Hopefully all of these plays cash for us. And that's all we got. Admittedly, a big sample size, or not a sample size, a big slate of games. A lot of units that we're going to have risk in this one when you consider everything. As long as we go 3 for 2, we will be profitable, but I'm hoping we can go 4-1 or even 5-0 on all these plays. So let's hope that happens. I appreciate everybody for watching. Make sure to like the video, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Check out the Dub Club if you are interested, and have a good one.